Nobara, Nobito, and Nanami would spot a transfigured human begin to approach them. This transfigured human appeared to be humanoid in look, however Nobara in particular recognized the design. While she never fought it herself, she did see it for a moment, as she had to question if that was a finger bearer or not. However, she realized very quickly that this was definitely not a curse. This was a transfigured human, as the three of them stood on guard and ready to kill the transfigured human in front of them. The transfigured human started by lifting up both of their hands, with the group immediately able to spot that on both hands there was a mouth each. And out from those mouths, several flesh spears were sent flying towards both Nobara and Nanami. The human was able to see that out of the three of them, that Nobito was the fastest of them, so it wanted to try and go for the slower of the three. Nobara and Nanami would have quickly hopped to the side in order to avoid the flesh spears. While Nobara was able to dodge it, Nanami did get slightly cut by the flesh spear, however he was able to avoid it, but the transfigured human's arms moved with the two's movements, rapid firing out the flesh spears towards Nanami and Nobara to try and catch up to them. Nobito, although, felt a little bit insulted. After all, the transfigured human wasn't even going for him, so Nobito quickly disappeared and appeared behind the transfigured human, as Nobito was about to go for a punch on its back, but a moment before the punch landed, the transfigured human changed shape, as small spikes rose out all across the transfigured human's body. Nobito was just barely able to stop himself from landing the punch and getting impaled by a spike. The transfigured human was much smarter than they thought. They had underestimated its intelligence. But to Nobito, what was even more impressive was the fact that this transfigured human was able to detect Nobito before he could even reach him. After all, it would be one thing to be able to activate the spikes and set this up as a trap, another thing was actually reacting to Nobito to begin with. This transfigured human was a test that Manito was making to use specifically to fight against faster opponents, a transfigured human with a more sensitive body that would detect changes in the air based on movements, while also turning its body into a trap via making those spikes. However, while Nobito was able to avoid the spikes rising from its body, the transfigured human wasn't done with its counterattack yet, as one of the mouths that were firing at Nanami faded on the transfigured human's hands before rising on the transfigured human's back, as it then fired two flesh spears towards Nobito right off the bat. And while Nobito was able to avoid the first one, the second one stabbed into Nobito's left arm as he winced a bit in pain. Nanami, Nobara, and Nobito were surprised and impressed. From what they had seen of transfigured humans so far, they weren't smart. They were brain dead, but this one was smarter than normal, though it made Nobito begin to question if it was actually thinking, or if it was like a computer program based on commands. As the transfigured human quickly turned around, focusing curse energy towards his fist, which that shocked all three of them, as they could tell that in this transfigured human's composition, at least one of them was a previous sorcerer, as it went for a punch on Nobito, trying to take advantage of the fact that Nobito was injured. Nobito was just barely able to activate his technique on time to move himself out the way and avoid that strike. Nobito could tell in that moment this beast had quite good levels of physical strength, as he landed next to Nanami and Nobara. As Nobara then took a step forward while throwing up 10 nails into the air, before saying, "Come up with a plan, I'll hold off this thing," with a confident grin present on Nobara. She knew the planning wasn't exactly her thing, so she decided to take this thing on herself. Plus, she was already a good counter, and she knew she would certainly be able to last, as she smacked each of the nails in rapid succession to launch them towards the transfigured human while rushing towards them herself. Nobito and Nanami nodded as they decided to move back a bit and out of the transfigured human's view for now. As the transfigured human saw the nails from Nobara coming, it entered into a fighting stance, before punching each of the nails and colliding with them. However, each nail the transfigured human hit was met with an equal force. This thing's punches were equal to the nails. But this is when Nobara changed up her strategy and caught it off guard, by sliding underneath the fist and quickly slamming her hammer at the beast's side, or at least going for it. However, it countered via launching another flesh spear towards Nobara from the same side. This was what Nobara was actually hoping it would do, as she decided to meet it head on. She surrounded her hands completely in curse energy and caught the flesh spear. However, catching the flesh spear did make Nobara get pushed back quite a bit, and burned her hand somewhat. It was nothing too major, just a small friction burn. However, this was when Nobara dropped the spear and focused curse energy towards her hammer, smacking it against the spear to launch it towards the transfigured human. To Nobito, Nobara, and Nanami's shock, it didn't try and block or dodge the attack. The spear went right through the transfigured human's shoulder and pushed it back. At first, Nobara, Nanami, and Nobito thought that it was just going to reabsorb the attack, but no. It took clear damage from it. While the hole was quickly healed, it did end up taking some damage. They all had to wonder why. Why did it not try and dodge or block this attack? It then lifted up both of its hands and began to rapid-fire spears at Nobara. While Nobara did have enough time to move out the way, as a result of the shock from it deciding not to dodge, it did end up cutting her arm. As she suddenly was thinking about that, what weakness did it have that they could exploit? As suddenly all four of them felt the entire subway around them shake, causing Nobara and the transfigured human to almost lose their balance for a moment. However, Nanami and Nobara were both able to recognize at least one part of why the subway was shaking, as Nanami was impressed and amazed. After all, he knew it was Yuji. He could feel the clash that was between Mahito and Yuji, and Nobara couldn't help but think that's the power Yuji has now. Nobito, though, was by far and away the most surprised out of them. After all, he had never seen Yuji's strength until now. But this black flash had some unintended side effects, as a transfigured human began to shake and twitch a bit, mutating while curse energy rose off its body, becoming more and more refined. After all, this thing was still connected to Mahito and was one of his creations. It would also feel the side effects of Mahito landing a black flash. While most people would be terrified, a different expression rose on Nobara, an insane glee. Not just did Yuji get significantly stronger, but now this opponent had too. There was no way in hell she was going to let either stay ahead of her for too long, as Nobara's eyes almost glowed a bit with determination and insanity. She truly was a jujitsu sorcerer. However, this was when it clicked for Nobito as he noticed something. This transfigured human did have a weakness, and it was what he fought. The transfigured human functioned more like a machine rather than an actual person, which meant its moveset was more than likely limited as well as counters they could do. But more importantly, if it was attacked by its own body, it wouldn't register it as a threat, which made sense because it was its own body. Nobito then explained this to Nanami while Nobara was fighting against a transfigured human. As a transfigured human then changed its strategy, now instead going for a melee approach rather than a ranged approach and rushing at her. At the same time, Nobara also decided to take this chase head on. However, while she ran, she did scatter several nails all around the two of them. And before the two can reach each other, she threw two nails high up into the air as the transfigured human went for a punch on Nobara's face, but Nobara jumped over the punch and landed on her nails, as she then pushed them down while snapping and activating hairpin. The transfigured human's eyes would have widened in surprise, as it moved back in an attempt to move away from the hairpin. However, part of the transfigured human's body did get stabbed, and while it wasn't anything too major and it got healed, it was still damaged nonetheless. However, that was when someone else attempted to take advantage of this opening, as from behind the transfigured human, Nanami then went for the attack, slamming the ratio cleaver into the beast. However, the ratio cleaver was met with the human's arm, as it used it to clash its fist against the ratio cleaver. As the two fists clashed, Nanami was pushed back as it then lifted up its other hand, preparing to fire out another flesh spear, until the sound of a snap echoed all throughout the room, as the nails all around the transfigured human pointed towards it, and out from each of them a hairpin activated to impale into the human. This allowed Nanami and Nobara to make some distance, as now the transfigured human had countless holes in its body from this attack. Nobito could see that it was now in a damaged and weakened state, so it was going to take advantage of the state it was in, as Nobito grabbed one of the flesh spears already impaled into the ground and rocketed towards it. His goal was rather simple. He was attempting to stab it right through its chest. However, the holes in the transfigured human were quick to repair, as at the same moment that Nobito landed the stab, he suddenly felt a large amount of pain in his left arm. The transfigured human had rapid-fired flesh spears towards Nobito's left arm, seeing it as the weakened part of the body, which it was correct about, as this attack was enough to completely sever Nobito's left arm. However, this did not come without cost, as the transfigured human also got brutally damaged from the flesh spear. As the transfigured human was about to go in for another punch on Nobito's body, it suddenly was met with a pain in its side, as Nobara landed a strike on it with her hammer, focusing curse energy towards the hammer and launching it away from Nobito. Her nails she launched out from earlier flying back to her now, floating around her as she then said, "You two are a bit too injured for this. Head back to Shoko and get healed, then leave this to me." This was true. The both of them definitely needed healing. Nobito was heavily impacted by the loss of his arm. He was no longer the second fastest sorcerer because of that. He also could feel that he might actually start bleeding out the longer and longer they fought if this was not dealt with. Nanami was still recovering from the damage he took in the Dagon fight, however Nanami decided to stay. He wanted to make sure the next generation would do well and would live. While Nobara was slightly worried for Nanami, she could see there was no changing his decision, so instead she was going to make sure that Nanami didn't die. Nobito on the other hand left, knowing that the longer he stayed here, especially with his arm injury, the more he was risking things. He did focus on using curse energy to at least reinforce his body to slow himself from bleeding out. The transfigured human would have then gotten back up while looking to Nobara and Nanami. It was able to see that Nobito had chosen to leave. It was going to hunt down and kill Nobito after it was done with these two. This is when Nanami rushed towards their opponent. Taking the offense, the transfigured human lifted up both of their hands to begin firing out the flesh spears towards him. A focus entered into Nanami's eyes, focusing on hitting the ratio with each of the spears that he hit, as he hit the first spear and destroyed it thanks to hitting the weak point. Then he hit another and another. He was focusing on keeping the spear's attentions to himself. Nanami knew he wouldn't be able to actually get a hit on the transfigured human, but he still needed to keep going. As the transfigured human began to change, where the mouths were going on its body, changing spots to make the direction the spears were launched out of from less and less predictable. Nanami was now struggling to actually properly keep up with the spears, but even with that he was handling it just barely. However, while Nanami was playing defense, Nobara was not doing nothing. Instead, she was setting up several nails, 10s of them all with curse energy imbued into them. They had potent amounts of curse energy inside of them as well. As she said, now. This was the trap. Nanami was the defense, so Nobara could get a large amount of nails ready to fire. This is when Nanami moved out the way as Nobara began to rapid strike each of the nails. With each strike, the nails got more and more potent, the first nail clashing evenly with a spear, but as they continued to clash, Nobara's nails eventually overpowered the spears, as Nobara began to zone in on the final nail, a wide smile forming on Nobara as she recognized the feeling overwhelming her, as that final nail was not just one ordinary nail, but one amplified by the power of the Black Flash. Several nails struck the transfigured human, pushing it back further and further before the final nail struck. The final strike tore right through the transfigured human, doing a heavy amount of damage to it thanks to the Black Flash. Nobara then rushed towards it, picking up one of the flesh spears as she was moving. She then jumped high up into the air, jumping over the heavily damaged transfigured human as she then focused cursed energy towards her hammer, before smacking it against the spear. Once the hammer hit against the spear, it was another Black Flash, as it pierced right through its head. Nanami was watching this wide-eyed and amazed. That was the second Black Flash she had landed consecutively, as the transfigured human coughed up blood, feeling quite a bit of pain. It was almost dead as cursed energy surrounded its fist, aiming to do one more hit and trying to spite Nobara with that one hit, as Nobara landed and smacked her hammer against the transfigured human's side. This strike being the third Black Flash. And with the third Black Flash, the transfigured human was completely pulverized as it hit the wall. Nobara's nails then flew back to her body, catching them as she smiled a bit. She was still in the zone. Nanami had to admit that he was amazed by Nobara's performance. The fact Nobara landed 3 Black Flashes, he could see that there was a pretty big chance Nobara would have landed a 4th Black Flash as well consecutively if it wasn't for the fact the transfigured human was already dead from that attack. However, as Nanami watched this, he was left to realize something. Nanami couldn't take on this transfigured human. He needed Nobara to win. He was tired already, even more injured, but he could also see that Nobara had gotten even stronger. Nanami was outclassed, but he did have a prouder smile. This was a bitter pill for him to swallow, the fact that he wasn't strong enough now to be of much help. But, well, this was different. These students were already stronger than him, surpassing him, which meant that they were able to protect themselves now. He then told Nobara that he was going to deal with the transfigured humans that were present throughout Shibuya, then he would head to Shoko, telling Nobara that she's got it from here and to go back up Yuji. Nobara then gave him a thumbs up before starting to head in Yuji's direction in a hurry.